Hey guys, Dozer here bringing you a new video. I'm going to be talking a bit about Blitz this time. It's currently skirmish season for the end of 2021, and I thought I would weigh in with a new video so that we could have a bit of a discussion about Prism in Blitz and kind of just talk about it, because I don't think it's very controversial to say that Prism is not very favored in Blitz compared to CC. The main reason for that is that you cannot sideboard in Blitz. You have to bring exactly the same 40 cards into every matchup, and while you can swap around some equipment, that basically only comes in for things like, oh, do you run Goliath Gauntlet instead of Dreamweavers, or do you run Null Rune against Kano? Right, you're not really given a lot of breathing room to be able to swap cards around, and Prism is definitely one of the heroes that relies heavily on sideboarding for the correct matchup in order to, make sure that she has a good time in the game. So why is that? For newer players, or for players who haven't really looked at Prism before, why is it that Prism struggles so much in Blitz currently? Well, the biggest culprit is going to be Phantasm. So, as we all know, Prism's cards have Phantasm when they're in attack action and Illusionist. So it means if they get blocked by a 6 attack card or more, they get destroyed and the combat chain closes. So what that means for us is that your opponent, if they have a single 6 attack card in their hand, can throw it in front of whatever you attack with, causing your attack to be blocked by a single card that you normally have to pay at least 2 resources in order to play. The Heralds all basically cost 2, and your opponent's blocking that with 1 card. So since you're paying for a card to pitch with and to attack with, your opponent is trading 2 for 1 cards. Which is very good for them. In addition, you lose Go Again if you had it from Luminaris. So, the problem with that is that sure, you can use Footsteps, your legendary equipment piece, in order to get your action point back, but you have to pay a resource for that. If you pitched a yellow to get Go Again in the first place, then you have to have a blue in your hand, and along with that original yellow, in order to make sure you attack a second time. And your second attack is probably only going to be for about an average of 6 damage. So, you're basically hamstringing yourself by playing Prism in Blitz, because in Blitz, tempo is everything. You only have 20 HP to work with, which means you can get down to lethal very quickly. Prism does not block particularly well. I mean, she has 3 block on her Heralds, but the problem is that 3 block is kind of average, really. It's not like she has extra block or access to extra block inherently. And if you block with a single card as Prism, in that situation where you had a yellow, blue, and 2 Heralds, really what's going to happen is you're not going to have enough cards in hand to do more than 6 damage on your next turn. Prism doesn't have a weapon to swing with to supplement her damage, like maybe even Brute would, right? Or even something like Ninja, or even Warriors, like with Bolton, right? You don't have the take flight, charge into Raiden bread and butter. Whereas with Prism, you swing with 1 attack and you're done. And they're really easy to block too, because unless it's a red Herald, you're not going to have that breakpoint to threaten the extra damage. So if you block 6 block, right, with 2 Heralds or 2 cards, and then you attack with 1 Herald, you might think that that kind of helps the issue, but then if your opponent pops your Phantasm, then you had 0 turn and you only stop 6 damage. So your whole turn is effectively getting very little value compared to a lot of other heroes which don't have this counterplay mechanic, which heavily cripples Prism in those counter matchups, like Guardian or Brute, or even some other matchups that inherently run big attacks, like Runeblade can run Ninth Blade of the Blood Oath, and even some other decks can run some 6s naturally, like Command and Conquer is a staple card, for instance, or Nourishing Emptiness and Warrior or Wizard. So where does that leave Prism? Well, Prism has access to these Heralds, which do a lot of damage, and have Go Again, so they're like pretty efficient cards, when they're not being popped, which is great and all. But then Prism's only other cards that she has access to are effectively the auras, the Spectras, right? Merciful, Ode, Parable, Genesis, Arclight, and even your Spectral Shield generators like Prismatic Shield. The problem with these cards is that they're very slow to get you value. In CC, that's totally fine because you have time to get that value out of them. You know, you have time to start racking up Merciful damage over time, or Ode damage over time, or even Genesis damage. But if you spend 4 resources and 3 cards in Blitz to try and put down an aura, you're going to find that that gets popped pretty easily, or you're going to be put at lethal range very quickly, and now you're going to have to block out every turn to not die. Then that kind of leads us into the second factor, well, I guess just another factor, why Prism struggles so much in Blitz. Illusionist doesn't have access to very good equipment. Now, obviously, Phantasmal Footsteps is great, you know, and obviously Vestige of Soul is great. Halo of Illumination's fine for Prism, but the problem is that they don't have innate block like Battleworn. Warrior, Runeblade, Brute, Guardian, all these classes have access to Battleworn that makes it very difficult to push through damage while attacking their hand. Specifically in the instance of Herald of Erudition, Erudition is a very key card for Prism. You know, if it hits, you have to draw 2 cards. If it has Go Again, that's really good. And it has Dominate. So you'd think, oh, well, I can use this card to hit easier. Well, normally that would be true, and against someone like a Ninja or a Ranger or a Wizard, that'd be true. The problem is that against any Battleworn 2 character, they can block you with 1 card and an armor piece. And most people have learned to hold their Battleworn for Erudition specifically. And since you only get 2 of these in Blitz, you don't have a lot of opportunities to wear people down to then make sure Erudition lands without landing something like a Pummel or an attack buff, such as a Phantasmify or like a Pummel, like we just said, or the like. So basically all that to say, because Prism doesn't have armor, Prism cannot hold cards in hand to still heap up pressure on the opponent, which doesn't have Husk, for instance. And Prism really needs armor to be able to do that, because otherwise she just has to not block. And if Prism doesn't block and all she's doing is throwing, 12 damage a turn at you with Heralds that can be popped, that's no better than a lot of other decks just raw value with a 4-card hand. And Prism doesn't really make use of 5 cards hands very well, especially if she goes with the 2-cost Herald package. Now, you can make a really aggressive Prism list. You can make a list that runs like all the Wartune Heralds. It runs some Spears of Surreality because they all cost 1 and they do good damage. You can run Phantasmify for an efficient buff, but the problem is, again, in those matchups where you're facing off against Brute or Guardian, you have to be stuck with whatever build you went towards because you're in Blitz. You don't have the flexibility to say, oh, well, against Guardian, I'll side out some of my red Phantasms and side in some auras because they'll have a hard time dealing with them. Or, oh, I'm up against a aggro deck. I don't have time to get my auras off. Let me switch back into my Heralds. With Prism, you have to split the difference. You have to sit there and say to yourself, okay, well, I can't justify running all Heralds or all auras. And then if you run kind of a mix of both, you kind of weaken both plans. The auras don't block, which makes it harder for you to get value out of your Heralds. And if you run all Heralds, then you can just not get through against some strategies. So that's the main reasons that Prism has difficulty in Blitz at the moment, right? Obviously, you can run your Herald of Triumph, and that can get through a lot of times against Guardian matchups and can threaten some damage. But when you're comparing these cards to some of the options that other classes have in Blitz, Prism doesn't have a lot of trickiness, right? Brute, specifically Rhinar, can just literally one-shot you if he gets the right hand, right? If he gets enough Intimidates off and enough attack buffs, he can effectively take you down from full to 0. And there's nothing you can really do about it. And when those dice and everything go well for the Rhinar. So Rhinar has that really high ceiling and a pretty good floor. Being able to swing the weapon every turn, having good block, etc. Armor. You've got stuff like Guardian, which have the high armor. They have the on-demand Dominate to force through damage and the hit effects. as well as having just absolutely monstrous cards like Crippling Crush for Bravo, or even Tear Asunder for both Bravo and Oldheim, because they can use that to force damage through and control tempo, and it's a really good card. Other decks like Ira can kind of just Kodachi attack every turn while blocking 6, and they can do that, and it's really hard to block that. It's really hard to stop that, and even they run 6s to help pop your Phantasms and just have really efficient blocking turns. While they're threatening the Mask of Momentum triggers, and Katsu can do sort of similar things. And then Dorinthia, right? So Dorinthia is really strong, as is Kano and Blitz. And why is that? Well, Dorinthia's got a lot of armor, which is great. She's got a good weapon, which is great. So it's consistent. But more than that, Dorinthia has the ability to pressure you once you're at lethal extremely well. And so does Kano. So for instance, if I'm playing Kano, right? If I'm playing Dorinthia, and I've got you down to about 8 health, you basically have to block everything that I'm doing. Because if you don't, and I have a way around it, I'm just going to, beat you on the spot, right? With Kano, he can use his instant ability to fish for damage, and if you don't save enough cards for pitch to stop that, or the on-hits or whatever, then you can just die on the spot. Same thing with Dorinthia. If Dorinthia gets you down kind of low, just by trading back and forth efficiently, the Dorinthia player can always threaten an attack react that basically forces you to overblock a lot of the time, and then she just doesn't use the card and might pressure you in a different way. There's also especially dirty lines that Dorinthia can do where she swings a weapon, right, with Spoils for War or whatever it's called, and Spoils of War, I think it's called, and it gives go again with the sword, and it gives it an attack buff. So you might say, oh, well, I have to overblock it to prevent her from getting the go again to apply to the sword, and then can try and stop her turn there. But she might have been threatening a Scar for a Scar, for instance, where she comes in, or even a Command and Conquer, right, where she comes in with the go again, instead of swinging the sword, she swings a really good attack action. And now you're thinking to yourself, oh, crap, I just overblocked that, and now I can't stop this attack action, and now I'm super on the back foot and I'm going to die, right? Dorinthia has access to plays like that, and just inherently, and Kano has plays, kind of similar to that inherently as well. Prism, on the other hand, does not have a lot of inbuilt trickiness. Yeah, she can run Pummel, but it's really expensive for Prism to use Pummel because all of her cards are basically yellow, so it's not like she can effectively use it for damage. A lot of the time it's going to be there just to control tempo a little bit, and try and get into a better position, but it doesn't actually synergize all that well or threaten much at the end of the game. Although it's not, again, Pummel's not a bad play, it's just very tricky to use. You also have to have a 4-card hand effectively to use it, which just makes it very awkward in a deck that can't really hold cards very well compared to the ones that have armor. So beyond that, Prism doesn't have attack reactions inherent to her. She doesn't have, ancestral empowerment or, the Glint of Quicksilver, all these really good cards that kind of help your gameplay and get around blocks and not be telegraphed. Basically, Prism is telegraphed. She can't effectively get around defenses very well, and if your opponent's got those Phantasm breakers, then you're really sad. So you might even consider running stuff like the Librarian in Blitz. It's not very effective from my experience. It feels really good when you get to draw cards by making tokens, but in reality, your tokens are very expensive. They cost a lot of resources to play. And if this is in your arsenal, that card you're drawing is effectively just potentially an arsenal that you could have used every turn. Now, if you had the absolute god situation where you had a Librarian and Arsenal and the Grand Library or the Great Library of Solana on the field, and you had 6-card hands every turn, yeah, that'd be pretty good. But in Blitz, while that's more likely to happen than in CC, because, you know, the 1 of library is a lot more highly likely to be up in your hand early. In Librarian, you can run 2 copies, whatever. It's not really a reliable strategy still, because even with 6 cards, you can't necessarily pressure people fast enough with auras or keep tempo well enough with heralds. So we can take a look at like a Prism deck that I've been cooking up just real briefly. Effectively, and you know, for anybody at FabDB, I would really like to be able to look at the side. Oh, I guess we can't look at sideboarding for Blitz, but that'd be really nice to be able to do, just to see the visual of all the cards out there, especially for equipment. But anyhow, basically it's a tank Prism list with a heavy blue investment, because you have the ability to run Iris. It's not good. This is probably a tier 3. You know, if we had these letter tiers, this is probably like a D tier deck. It could win games against some decks, but, you know, this is, especially Oldhim, by the way, Prism and Blitz with Glistens just kind of slaps Oldhim around. But Iris of Reality is not how you do that. Luminaris is how you do that. Iris of Reality was kind of something I was testing out just to see if it had any merit at all. You know, you run a lot of blues, like your blue heralds, whatever. You run some blue phantasms because they're efficient, right? Blue defense react, unmovable, because, you know, it just fits the bill. You know, you got your soul shields and your prismatics. Got some, yeah, like your erudition. You know, big defense reactions, defense reacts, sigils, prismatic. And the idea was basically turn 0 is really strong in Blitz because you can bank resources that are double as effective as normal. So turn 0 double sigil, when your opponent swings at you for only 6 and you block it, you're starting the game with 6 extra HP. That's pretty strong. In addition, you could do something like dropping a Genesis early, or you could drop a Prismatic Shield early. And so kind of the idea is that you go second, and you block a little bit, and you try and resolve your red Prismatic Shield or some sigils, or some combination of that. And then on your next turn, you get some blues, and with your Iris, you kick off the game with about 12 damage from your Spectral Shields. It's pretty good. It's not OP or amazing, but that was kind of the idea. Also, if you were able to keep your shields alive, you'd be able to swing with your, you know, with your Iris at the end of your turn and stuff. But it's not really reliable to do that. Also, because like the other idea was that, okay, well, if I have my shields out and I Iris, I have a blue or something and an attack in my hand maybe, and maybe I can throw a Phantasmaclasm at the end, or maybe I can throw an Enigma Chimera at the end, or a Herald or something, after doing 8 damage from shields. So that'd be pretty good, but the problem is like, until we get targets for Iris of Reality that aren't just broken by our opponent just destroying them every turn, we can't really do that. So I think the concept is kind of interesting though, but I would say that realistically, you just want to use Luminaris. Iris of Reality is cute, but Luminaris is way better because it costs 0. You can glisten up a token, do the Tank Prism game plan. Does not work versus Brute like at all because of the Intimidate. Not very good against Ira or Dorinthia, I'll be honest. But or even Kano. But if you're looking for some Prism Blitz to play, you can do that. Alternatively, you can look at one of my old decks from a long time ago. See if I can find it in here. Basically, the idea is just a hyper aggro Prism. This might be it. This looks about right. No. I mean, this is an option, right? You run like Red Heralds, the best ones, right? You got some defense reacts for the Dorinthia matchups and such. Blinding Beam is interesting to keep your 6 attacks from dying. The equipment, you just run, you know, your normal equipment. You got your Heralds, the Yellow Heralds, Phantasmify for an efficient attack buff, Pummel for an efficient way to kind of pump your erudition. Tome of Divinity as a 1-up just in case it ever hits. If not, you just pitch it, not a big deal. Blinding Beam, blues as well, because you can just make sure your attacks get through while pitching for stuff. and just some good blue heralds. Library, just because in Blitz, it makes sense to try and get as much value as possible, as quickly as possible, and Library is going to be hard to break for people in Blitz, so you might be able to sneak games off of it. I still don't own Library and will not be purchasing one at any time soon. I just proxy it when I play this, but if you want to run it, be my guest, right? But if not, just put in another tome. It's not a big deal. Additionally, you could run the following deck. We'll just kind of make it here live. Basically, the most aggressive version of Prism you can run, where you just say, I don't care about the Guardian matchup. I'm just going to try and, or the Brute matchup. I'm just going to try and win by just pumping out damage. Start with 2 Erudition. You run your yellow protections and your blue protections. You can run your War Tunes is what you really want. It's like the big thing. You can run like yellow and blue Triumphs, but not necessarily something you want to keep in there. Red Illuminate, yellow Illuminate. You want to run Luminaris because we want it to go again. We want Footsteps. We want Phantasmify, yellow. You can also run red. You want to skip any aura stuff. It's not really going to be valuable for us. You can do Soul Shield for yellows and defense reactions. You want to do Spears red, Spears yellow, because they have the break point of 4 and 5, just to push damage through. You want to do... you can do Vestige. You could also do Find All Spring Tunic. And then you just throw in all the War Tunes. And now you just want to put in a couple more interesting cards, such as Push the Point. You can run reds or yellows. I think both are fine. I think red is for optimization, and yellow's okay. But if I had to run one, I would probably just run the red, because it's just the biggest one. And then I would run stuff like Captain's Call. Yellow, specifically. You could run the red, but I don't really recommend it. And then you could run something like Razor Reflex. And you could run something like Sink Below. Honestly, yellow is probably the one you want just for the pitch. You're not really going to get a lot of use out of the red one necessarily in comparison. Because normally what you're just going to try and do is block the Dawn Blade with nothing and then Sink Below stop the damage. So not really big deal to have 4 block over 3. And then from there, you just want... see, is there anything I'm forgetting here? Got our Illuminates, got our Zero... oh, yeah, and we want like a... well, we can do our equipment, right? Footsteps... Spring Tunic. And you just do Spring Tunic, basically, because it can pay for Blinding Beam. That's right. Yeah. So you want, like, yellow Blinding Beam. Just so that you can arsenal it, and then when you have your Tunic resource, you can use that without pitching a card out of your hand. And the reason you run all these cards is that, you know, like, run Dreamweavers, and you can run, like, Skullcap, probably, is the best thing to run. And I would say that's, like, the deck right there. You've got a ton of 1 costs to synergize with your Razor Reflex and your other stuff like that, like your Captain's Call. All your stuff here is basically meant to do an entire turn off of a single yellow, such as Wartune Herald into Push the Point off of the yellow, probably with an attack buff beforehand, like a Captain's Call or something. Or if you had an Illuminate in your hand, right, you could do Spears, Wartune, Illuminate, and that's a full turn. And it's a lot more flexible to play this because you don't have to worry about what you're blocking with as much. You can play a 1-card hand of this deck by throwing an Illuminate out. You can throw a 2-card hand out with pitching a yellow with a Yellow Herald, like a protection or something. you could play a 3-card hand by pitching a yellow to do 2 War Tunes, or War Tune into push the point. And you can do a 4-card hand by obviously throwing in a 0-cost card as well. Or having the Tunic resource to pay for something else like a Phantasmify beforehand. So this is just like a hyper aggro Prism. There's really not much thought involved in this deck. I would probably put this still around like low tier, but if you dodge your Guardian and Brute matchups, you might be able to take some games off people. This is the list I would play with Prism personally if I was playing it, just at an event. So, you know, hopefully you find some enjoyment out of that deck. I don't know what Prism's going to be able to do in Blitz in the future. Maybe with the new set in Everfest, we'll get some options that lets Prism kind of have more balanced matchups in Blitz, where she doesn't have to hard commit to Heralds or Auras. Maybe she has something that splits the difference, but that's not out yet, so let's not hold on to our hope there. But I'll put this video description, I'll make this like, you know, let's see here, Skirmish season, November 2021, Blitz. Well, I guess it's, you know, here, so it's Blitz. And I'll just put it in the description for you guys, so you can take a look at it. Yeah, if you guys play Prism and Blitz and find success with her, leave me a comment and kind of tell me what your list looks like. I'd be really curious to see like what is leading you to success, whether it's meta differences, whether it's build choices or tech options. Maybe you run a lot of you know, Command and Conquers or generic cards that help you break through and actually get your attacks off. That could be interesting. But yeah, just let me know what you do, and be eager to see that in the comments. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.